The Simpsons is the most popular adult animated series of all time. That's uncontested, and with that success came a flood of merchandise. Toys, clothing, board games, mugs, comic books, plush, and of course, video games were all rapidly produced to meet the Simpsons craze. While some cool collectibles came from this, the games we got were bad. Well, the console ones were. The arcade game looks really fun from what I've seen, and I'll try to snag one of those arcade 1-up cabinets where they eventually release, but generally speaking, early Simpsons video games aren't very good. As the popularity of the series started to dwindle, however, developers were given more time to work with, and as a result, we got some more polished and quality games. The Simpsons Road Rage is the start of the quality Simpsons games era, and it came out in 2001. Then, 2 years later, The Simpsons Hit and Run will go down as one of my favorite games of all time. Its gameplay is top-notch, my nostalgia forward is through the roof, and it really captures the essence of the show. It's the perfect Simpsons video game. Then, 4 years later, releasing alongside the Simpsons movie, we got the Simpsons Game, and since then, nothing but mobile games. This is the newest full Simpsons video game we have, and it's got a stellar predecessor to attempt to live up to. That's quite a lot of pressure to put on this game. When you put it like that, it absolutely does not live up to the task. Not many games could, but when you take those huge expectations away, you'll realize this is a pretty damn good game. It's not a masterpiece by any means, but it's fun and really diversifies the Simpsons video game portfolio. Rather than the Grand Theft Auto style of gameplay, the Simpsons game focuses way more on character-based puzzle solving and situational platforming. There's 4 playable characters, each with a double jump and punch, but beyond that, their movesets are completely unique. Homer can blow up to a giant ball and plow through hordes of enemies, he can inflate with helium and fly for a short time, and he can become Gummy Homer and shoot giant balls of sludge at faraway enemies. Bart can use a slingshot, climb certain walls, grab onto hooks, and glide for a short time. This glide does practically nothing in the early game, but there's eventually an upgrade that makes it way more reasonable. Lisa has her sacks that can stun enemies and even confuse them into attacking each other, and the Hand of Buddha, which allows her to move larger objects. This is also upgraded around midway through the game and allows her to flick enemies as well as shock and freeze them, which actually becomes a quite vital tool for solving certain puzzles. And finally, Marge, who has a megaphone that not only damages enemies, but can also pull in crowds to fight for her. When there's any NPC around, you can recoup them, then direct a group of them to complete a certain objective, whether that be defeating an enemy or restoring a rundown building. She can also send Maggie into small spaces to activate different things, and it's really weird to play as Maggie in first person, but it's pretty funny and the sections never last more than a minute. That's a lot of unique abilities and it can be a bit overwhelming, but the game only has you playing as 2 characters at a time until the final section, but I'll talk about that later. Only working with 2 characters at a time is plenty manageable and makes the solutions to certain puzzles way easier to come by. The puzzles in this game are great. They're not always tough, but they're always well designed. Like, I was surprised at how well they're implemented. The movesets gave them a lot to work with and they didn't disappoint. Every combination of characters is used at one point or another, and their unique abilities genuinely provide a fresh experience with each matchup. I don't think I've ever seen a licensed game handle puzzles as well. Even my golden standard game, Battle for Bikini Bottom, doesn't quite match up in this regard. It made me critically think quite a few times throughout the game, but I was always able to figure out what to do given some time. The best way I can show off the character switching puzzles is with some key examples. In the first Marge level, she has to direct her mob to take out these different promotional vehicles, which makes some shaped blocks form. Then Lisa has to use the Hand of Buddha to move them to their proper place, and Marge has to direct the protesters to assemble a ramp. In another level, Homer has to go ball mode to get up a certain slope, then inflate himself to get atop a chunk of ice, and finally slam the ice to free a certain piece. Then Lisa has to use the Hand of Buddha to move the piece and eventually create a staircase for them to cross a certain gap. And another level has Homer use the Homer Ball to slam on giant bagpipes, which makes them shoot out air that Bart can use to glide across and clear a large gap. Lisa's abilities naturally lend themselves better to more complex puzzles, which is probably the reason she's playable in so many levels, but even when she's not there, they still have plenty of puzzles. They're not as complex though, it's more, get this character over there and switch this lever to allow your partner to cross too, which works, but is way less engaging. A lot of these sections will have tons of enemies you have to take out too, and the combat in this game is probably the most lackluster part of it. They'll have these waves of enemies for you to fight quite often, which I'm fine with, but these characters and movesets don't make combat all that fun. Sure, each character's special abilities can be used, but it's never required, and these abilities all require your meter to have some juice left in it. So once this meter runs out, you can't use the special move until you grab some more of your character's fuel. Homer's is whatever food the level has, Bart's are the different slingshot ammo, Lisa's are flowers, and Marge's are batteries. Each character also has a unique power-up that temporarily makes them invincible and one-hit KO enemies, which is super fun. The special abilities and power-ups are way more enjoyable to use than just the standard combat, but at one point or another, you're gonna have to fight with your hands, and this is stupid basic. Press X for a standard punch and XXY for a more powerful punch. That's it, which wouldn't be a problem if enemy waves weren't so common in the game, but the occasions in which you have to rely on these standard mechanics are minimal, so I'll let it slide. And speaking of combat, the boss fights are really good. They all put your skills to the test and use each character's abilities in an interesting way. The character switching, puzzle solving, and levels is perfectly applied to the boss fights, and I have to commend the game for that. They didn't just make a crazy powerful enemy, they made a challenge you have to think your way through, and it's awesome. The 2 boss fights that stuck stuck with me the most would be the one against the double-headed dragon and the one against, spoiler alert, Matt Groening. The double-headed dragon one has you playing as Marge and Homer, and the dragon goes around burning down buildings, which you have to keep intact by switching to Marge and putting the mob to work. Once the buildings are accounted for, you switch back to Homer to power roll across a broken bridge and hit the dragon. And in what should have been the final boss against Matt Groening, Homer and Bart's abilities are all put to use to hit him each time. For a couple hits, you have to avoid enemies and power roll into these targets, and for others, you have to switch to Bart, use his grapple to navigate the chandeliers, and eventually make it to this lever to damage him. And the enemies are Zoidbergs and Benders from Futurama. That is so freaking cool. Boss fights are always something I forget to mention when discussing games, but how they're handled is a big indicator of how much effort went into the game. When it's just some lousy big enemy, that shows the devs got lazy, but when the regular gameplay is cleverly applied to defeating some sort of enemy, that's good shit. I'm not bashing combat bosses. When the game is more combat or weapon oriented, they should by all means pin you against some larger strong foe, but if a game like this were to do it, that would just feel off. Anyways, as mentioned previously, platforming does play a decent role in the game too, and while it's lacking, it's still good. Every character has a double jump, which is what I like to see, and the shadows for everything work great, but the second jump just doesn't give you enough height in my opinion. The first jump should get you close to your targeted platform, and the second should give you the rest plus some time to adjust to make sure you land right where you want to. In this game, I found that in many cases I didn't have that luxury. I had just enough to get over there, which didn't get in the way too often, but I figured it was worth mentioning. This issue is practically non-existent when you play as Bart though, because this glider gives you that split second of extra time, which made him my go-to guy for platforming after the glider was upgraded. Oh, each level has character-specific collectibles hidden around too, which are really fun to look out for. They're usually visible and tough to reach spots that require you to complete a simple puzzle or challenge. These aren't necessary at all, but they do add a layer of depth to the game and provide tons of replayability. You know what else adds to replayability? Genuinely unique level themes. There's no grass, lava, water, and snow. There's areas we've seen in the show in the early game, then nothing but video game genre-based worlds, which are so cool. There's a Grand Theft Auto-based world, an RPG one with these hyper-stylized battles at the end of each section that I adore, and even an FPS-based one called Medal of Homer, like the cancelled Simpsons game. And this poster for Mortal Kombat is hilarious. Fun fact, Mortal Kombat is actually based on an old Scandinavian church song. Yeah, I'm not kidding, a Finnish hymn. The Simpsons brand of comedic satire is applied perfectly in this game. They rip on just about everything in the medium of video games, and I love it. The game captures the essence of the show flawlessly and makes it all about gaming. This is truly a Simpsons game. The plot isn't all that great, as it's one of those, uh-oh, we're in a video game, but it is applied in an interesting way. Bart finding the manual for the game is the stupidest shit out there, but them trying to escape the world, even saving a version of the family from an older game, that was pretty neat. And fighting the creator at the end was the perfect finale, and then it wasn't. Okay, I've been hinting at that too much, so after you defeat Matt, not that Matt, this Matt, he self-destructs the video game world they were in, so they all quickly escape to Springfield, which is still full of aliens. Lisa uses her hand of Buddha to build a stairway to heaven, then they go up, fight William Shakespeare for some reason, work through a pretty bland and enemy-filled level, then fight Benjamin Franklin? I don't know. After that, they confront God and have to defeat enemies in some Dance Dance Revolution nonsense. I'm not kidding you, this is actually how they decided to end the game. Then they work things out with God, at which point, the camera zooms out to reveal it was all just a game Ralph was playing. That's such an unsatisfying trope, and I hate that the game ends with that, but even if it didn't, this whole section in heaven seems dumb and tacked on. Fighting the creator is such a cool way to end the game, and the fight itself was great, but nah, dance dance. Okay, with that rant out of the way, I'd like to comment on the game's visuals. They're fine. For 2007, they look pretty good, but they're not much of an upgrade from hit and run, despite being on next-gen hardware. A lot of the buildings look less detailed than that game too, like wandering around Springfield was a lot of fun, but you can tell a lot less time was put into this, which makes sense. Springfield was the level in hit and run. Here it's a completely optional hub world, which I actually really like. It's a huge map and there's so much to see, but there's bus stops you can teleport between, which makes navigation a breeze. This huge size leaves a lot of open space. I feel like the map in Hit and Run had so much more to do and was way more fun, but it is what it is. I think the character models look significantly better though. They're way cleaner and more accurate to the show. And with that, the cutscenes in the game look a lot better too. The in-game cutscenes are very well done and look great, and there's even some 2D animated cutscenes that look like they're straight out of the show. These are beautiful and give the game even more of a Simpsons feel. So, closing thoughts. The game as a whole is phenomenal and is the most faithful Simpsons game we've had to date. It literally feels like a playable episode of the show. The gameplay is really fun and the character switching puzzle solving is some of the best I've ever played. Every character is so unique to play as, and that mixed with the visual style and level themes being so diverse keep the experience fresh the entire way through. They couldn't just do Hit and Run again. There's many people that want that now, but in 2007, people wanted a brand new feeling Simpsons game, and this definitely did the job. In fact, I think the games are very complementary to each other. One has crazy fun driving with a mission-based approach, and the other is more linear with a more puzzle platforming focus. Together they make one hell of a duo. I personally prefer prefer Hit and Run, but that's probably entirely nostalgia, and I'm willing to admit that the Simpsons game is the more well-rounded and quality Simpsons experience. To compare it to its rival of the generation, I think it is slightly better than Family Guy Back to the Multiverse. And when compared to the video game of Matt Groening's other show, Futurama, well, I have no idea. I own the game, but I haven't played it. If you want me to figure that one out, let me know in the comments, and be sure to like the video so I know you enjoyed it and so more people can see it. Thank you for watching. If this is your first video of mine, please consider subscribing, and if you want to watch more videos like this one, check out my Family Guy Back to the Multiverse video, or maybe my Hit and Run video essay on why it really needs to be remade. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you later.